Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to the Gentle Mastery Podcast. I'm Dave, and today we're continuing the legacy activation sequence that began last week with the podcast on the power of questioning. If you haven't listened to that, I urge you to do so, since that's stage one of the legacy activation process. Maybe even more important than the podcast is the supplemental deep dive I recorded for my YouTube channel on how questioning opens a portal to what's possible. I'll put the link to that 11-minute video in the description of this podcast so that you can check it out. This week is stage 2, taking ownership of your inner world. I'll be reading directly from the resource guide. Get yours at the link in the description, and riffing off of what's written in the guide. There are multiple resources that I referenced in today's podcast, and they are some of the most powerful change catalysts I've ever come across. These are the resources that I go back to over and over again still. Plus, I'm adding one new resource that only those of you watching and listening to this podcast will get. So be sure to hang in until the end so you don't miss anything. The Gentle Mastery Legacy Activation Resource Guide, Stage 2. If you're ready to take ownership of your inner world, reading from the guide. You've come far by achieving, optimizing, and pushing through. You've mastered the outer game, results, recognition, even reinvention. But now, something more profound is stirring. You sense that the next level of your evolution won't come from upgrading your strategy. It will come from upgrading your self-awareness. You're starting to realize this isn't about achieving more. It's about becoming someone new. So here's what I want to say about that opening paragraph in this stage of the guide. This applies to everyone. You may not be at a point in your life where you feel like you've got it all figured out, or you may be. You may be one of those people who I work with who does indeed, quote unquote, have it all figured out, at least in the material world. Either way, you're starting to understand that there's more, and that you want to take control of what that is. So keep listening with me. You're noticing that external wins no longer satisfy you the way they used to. Promotions, praise, productivity, they feel hollow. Not because they don't matter, but because they're no longer enough. You're beginning to feel a pull inward, a call to take radical responsibility for your thoughts, emotions, energy, and outcomes. Not from blame or shame, but from a deep desire to reclaim your power. Yes, this is about waking up, folks. This is about reclaiming your power, reclaiming your inner authority, your own inner world, taking sovereignty over your inner world. You might be saying things like, I'm tired of outsourcing my peace to other people's behavior. I got to say, that's one that I completely relate to. When I was when my peace was depending on how other people acted and felt, it was just always a downward spiral. You might also be saying, I want to stop being reactive and start being intentional. Intention's where it all begins, folks. I keep repeating the same patterns even with all this insight. Why? You've got the insight, but if you're not ready to step into it, to step up and take it, if you don't feel like you've got the right guidance for that, this resource guide is definitely for you. You might say, I've read the books, done the mindset work, and still feel stuck. I can't coach myself out of this anymore. Something deeper needs to shift. You may still be clinging to beliefs like, if I find the right system, I'll finally feel aligned. If I can control my environment, I won't have to feel uncomfortable. Personal development should be fast, logical, and linear. But those beliefs are unraveling because they're not matching your lived experience anymore. That's a big one. What you're recognizing is this. The discomfort you're feeling isn't failure, it's feedback. What used to work for you now feels performative, draining, or irrelevant. Your inner dialogue has become louder than the external applause. You realize it's time to shift from fixing the surface to examining the source. That's what this week is all about. Moving from surface fixes, band-aids, to addressing your real source of power, your inner source. This stage is sacred. It's where real self-leadership begins. Not as a performance, but as a presence. When you arrive here, it's not because something went wrong. It's because you're finally ready to take full ownership of your inner world and meet yourself beyond the mask of mastery. So I've got some resources I'm going to dive into, but I want to talk a little bit more about what I just said, which is it is a sacred stage. This, following the questioning stage, questioning gives you the power to move into this stage. Questioning unlocks new possibilities. And this stage is where you begin to see the limitless possibilities that are available for you. That's why this stage is so sacred. That's why I continue to return to it over and over and over again, because no matter how much time we spend working through our actualization of our highest self, we always come up against edge moments, moments that we haven't faced before. And these resources in this section of the guide are the ones that help me remember my innate power, remember that even though I've mastered so much around me, especially in the world that I'm presenting to others, there's something beyond that mastery. Because sometimes that mastery can be a mask for the edge or the boundary that we've now run up against. And these are the resources I go back to take full ownership once again of my inner world, because our inner worlds continue to unfold and evolve, and we must unfold and evolve with them. These are some of the tools that I use. The first one listed here is actually a video that I've shot, and it's one of my favorites. It's called The Inspiring Story Behind Gentle Mastery. So this is the story that I shared on the Gentle Mastery YouTube channel of how I broke free from old patterns and limiting beliefs to find genuine inner peace and emotional freedom, and how it led to manifesting more abundance than I ever thought possible. So those of you who've been listening or following along for a while, you may already be familiar with this story, but it's worth going back and looking at it again, because there was a lot of self-discovery that had to occur for this particular evolution in my consciousness evolution, my consciousness growth. And it's inspiring, if I do say so myself, to know that you can go from feeling trapped to feeling free, to know that you can go from feeling like you have to perform a particular identity or fit into a certain box, or I used to call it like turning myself into a pretzel in order to get other people's approval, in order to keep my job, in order to do all of those things that I was clinging to because of the survival, the needs for survival. And the truth is, we all know how to survive. Our inner selves, our higher selves, know how to lead us to a higher place where survival isn't a struggle anymore. It becomes a transformational experience, allowing us to access the highest versions of ourselves and then find the easy, aligned way for survival. The next resource is probably my favorite resource that I ever provide to anyone, but it can be overwhelming. I'll just read you what the resource guide says. This is a book, and it's actually this book. I Am by Howard Falco. I am the power of discovering who you really are. Here's what I wrote in the resource guide about that. This was the first resource that invited me to stop seeing myself as the victim of my circumstances and begin seeing myself as the creator of my reality. Now that's a big step, folks. I read it during a time of profound unraveling, and it gave me language and power I didn't know I had. It showed me that personal responsibility isn't blame, it's liberation. So when I talk in here, I don't tell the story in the resource guide because it's intended to be relatively bite-sized. It is over 20 pages and definitely worth the download. When I talk about it being a time of profound unraveling, this was the ending of everything that I had built in terms of my previous business, my web development business. It had dwindled over multiple years after hitting an apex and my business partner leaving the business. Then it dwindled, and I was not prepared for that in any way. My nervous system was not prepared for it. My consciousness was not prepared for it. It was definitely an unraveling. It was definitely me at the edges of my self. And I had to go through some pretty hard lessons during that period. And those pretty hard lessons included having my luxury car repossessed, and a few other embarrassing tidbits. But those struggles, those failures, what felt like failures at the time, those defeats, are what led me to this amazing book. And I will always be grateful that this happened. Here's the other thing I say in the resource guide, though, about I Am. One of the most important things I learned during this phase is that awakening has stages. Not everyone around you will be ready to step into full responsibility for their experience. And that's okay. This stage is about you beginning to see your agency in every area of your life. That insight alone can change everything. So when I talk about this, when I talk about the multiple stages of awakening, this book is a catalyst for those who are willing to recognize and step into their own power in a very well, the only word for it is a very powerful way. Howard Falco pulls no punches. Howard Falco taught me that I am 100% responsible for my reality. This is a primer, if you will. This is a field book for 5D reality. And it is not for everyone. So that's why there's another book in the resource guide that I'm going to talk about now. And that book is this one that I'm showing the camera for those of you who are watching on the podcast on YouTube. It's called The Code of the Extraordinary Mind. It's by Vishen Lakhiani. And y'all might know who Vishen is. He's the founder of Mind Valley. It's remarkable. It is the transition story of somebody who was completely trapped, who allowed himself to be completely trapped in his own life due to the things that he talks about in the book. And he works through the book and tells the story of going from that place of entrapment to going to that place of actually co-founding Mind Valley. Here's what the resource guide says. This extraordinary book became my go-to book for friends and clients who weren't ready for Howard Falco's book, I Am. Because remember, it's very, very powerful. And it really tells the truth. The Code of the Extraordinary Mind made similar truths more accessible and started really powerful conversations. I would give this to people, and some of them would come back to me and say, I feel like you understand me. I feel like you gave me this book because you understand who I really am, the powerful person that I really am, and I've never felt understood like that before. That's an incredible value, and I would love everybody who's listening and watching this who has any inkling that they want to have a sense of that kind of power for themselves to pick up this book and read it. Here's the other thing I wrote in the resource guide. It's what I just talked about. A turning point came when a colleague told me this book makes me feel seen. I didn't know there was anyone else asking these questions. That was when I realized conscious leaders seek this path, and that leading others down this path is my gift. This is what I do with the Gentle Mastery Method. This is what I do with legacy activation. This is why the consciousness signature, I've created it through the systems that I work with. I am here to lead conscious people who are seeking this path. And read The Code of the Extraordinary Mind if you want to have language for why you are seeking. And if you want to have processes for taking ownership of your inner world. This is what this stage is about. And it's these resources that confirmed for me that this is the work that I'm here to do. And I sometimes can't believe that I get to do it, and get to do it with such powerful people who are working with me to create something to help heal the world. I've promised you an extra resource, so I'm going to mention that now. I don't yet have it in print. I have listened to it. That's my process. I listen on audible.com to these books, and then I buy them. So I've just finished listening to Howard Falco's new book. He's written others after I Am, but this is the first one that takes the work of I Am and goes even deeper. It's called Invincible, and it is remarkable. For anybody who's already familiar with I Am, or anybody who's already read The Code of the Extraordinary Mind, or anybody who just wants to dive totally into the deep end, Invincible is filled with Howard's amazing wisdom regarding our minds and our intentions and our beliefs and how we can use those to create any reality we choose to. I highly recommend it. I can't wait to hear from those of you who are watching, listening. Ask your questions, send me your messages. Let's talk more about this. This is what I'm here to bring to the world. Thank you so much for joining me again on the podcast. There will be stage 3 in next week's podcast. Stage 3 is all about the search for meaning. But remember, these stages occur for a reason. These are the 7 stages that I went through in activating my own legacy, which is what I'm living out now. And the resource guide has all 7 stages, and it's sectioned into, it's organized into these different sections so that you can find where you are in the 7 steps. And I'm going to go back up to the top of the resource guide and just read you the table of contents, because it is the 7 stages. So the first stage is questioning. The second stage is the one that we just talked about, taking ownership. The third stage is searching for meaning. That will be next week. The fourth stage is embracing your actualization. The fifth stage is trying to turn inner work into real life change. Now, I know a lot of you are there. A lot of you have done the inner work, and you're wanting to see real life change. That's stage 5 in the resource guide. Resources are available for you now. Stage 6 is rethinking wealth. So my clients tend to be those who have mastered the 3D material game. They have created wealth. They've created multiple generations of wealth, and they are rethinking how to utilize that for the betterment of the planet, so that when their wealth gets handed down, there will be something here to use that for. And then the 7th stage is exploring your consciousness signature. So please download it. Please let me know what you think. Please get these resources, and I will see you next week. Peace.